Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sarah Corcoran. I am the Conservation Program Manager for the Pennsylvania chapter of the Sierra Club. I am also the coordinator for Safe Pennsylvania Forest, which is the coalition that is putting the webinars together. We are honored today to be able to hear a presentation from John Schwartzer from Michaux State Forest, Forest District number 1 of our 20 state forest districts. And he is going to tell us all about another state forest within our wonderful Commonwealth. If you'd like to see recordings of either the Tayadatin or Delaware State Forest interviews that we have done previous to this, I will send out links to those as well when I send out the recording of this webinar. So with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to John, and let's all learn something new about Michaux State Forest today.
Thank you, Sarah. As you said, the Commonwealth is split into 20 forest districts. Today, we're focusing on the Michaux State Forest, which covers Adams, York, Cumberland, and Franklin counties. Not slide advancing. There we go. No, I'm sorry about that. The Michaux State Forest is named in honor of André Michaux, a French botanist who was dispatched by the King and Queen of France in 1785 to gather plants for the royal gardens. He and his son, Francis André Michaux, discovered and named a host of wildflowers, shrubs, and trees previously unknown in the independent United States. So why do we have a Michaux State Forest and a service forester like me here to talk to you? It has a very deep history, which I'll touch on briefly, but for now it's because the 1971 amendment to the Pennsylvania Constitution states that the public natural resources are a common property of all the people, including generations yet to come, as laid out in Article 1, Section 27 of the Pennsylvania State Constitution. So the state is legislatively responsible to ensure that there are sustainable forests for the people to enjoy. Our mission is to ensure the long-term health, viability, and productivity of the Commonwealth's forests and to conserve native wild plants. It's a pretty simple mission statement, but notice that it doesn't say that it is only the publicly owned forests. So private land is included, which is why we have private land assistance positions in district staff like myself. We strive towards that mission through ecosystem management, meaning to preserve forest function and services while meeting socio-economic, political, and cultural needs. We keep the forest's wild character, meaning we're not planting plantations where we could get much more timber on the same acreage, and also maintaining diversity for resilience to insect and disease, and to provide the best habitat for our wildlife. Pure water is a founding feature for state forest management. We also offer low density recreation, habitat, as I said, and sustained yields of quality timber and mineral resources. The captions are across my slide, one moment. We do this by protecting forest lands, public and private, from damage and destruction by fires, insects, disease, and other agents. So here's an example of an insect infestation attacking our forest. And I'd like to give you a little bit of background about Pennsylvania in general, if you haven't seen some of the other presentations. 58% of the Commonwealth is forested, but of that, only about 13% are held in public trust by the Bureau of Forestry. Other states have more forest land, but the species and quality of our forests make us the #1 producer of hardwood timber. And I've been accused of speaking 2 languages. My first language is English. My second language is Foresterese. So to spell out some of the information that I'm going over, I just want to make sure everyone's aware of what an acre is. I'm going to be speaking in acres quite a lot. And an acre is roughly the size of a football field minus the end zones, to give you an idea of what an acre is. Here is the Michaux State Forest public use map, and you can see it's sort of kidney bean shaped, and we're going to be seeing that shape quite a bit during this presentation. And also the state is split into ecoregions. So we have districts, but then there are ecoregions. And ecoregions are defined as an area that is uniform in geology, climate, soils, and vegetation. You may recognize the shape of the South Mountain kidney bean down there as roughly the shape of the Michaux State Forest. It matches the ecoregion pretty closely. Our forest is the ecoregion. It appears small, but when you take away the state lines and zoom out, you can see that the South Mountain is just the northern tip of a much larger ecoregion, the Blue Ridge ecoregion shown in green, which extends from southern Pennsylvania all the way down to Georgia. With a population of just under 1 million people in the 4-county area of our district, the Michaux is also less than 2 hours drive from Baltimore, Washington, D.C. metro areas, and sees significant use from smaller cities such as Hagerstown and Fredericksburg, which are just across the Maryland-Pennsylvania border. There are 5.1 million people living within 60 miles of the Michaux State Forest, making it one of the most used state forests for recreational activities. So let's lay down a good foundation of the Michaux, starting with the bedrock. Some may say there are no volcanoes in Pennsylvania, but the well-kept secret is that the Michaux State Forest is centered over a caldera. If you're unfamiliar with a caldera, one of the most famous calderas you may have heard of is the Yellowstone supervolcano. Our district office sits near the edge of a smaller caldera called the Big Hill caldera. But the last eruption blanketed the surrounding areas with thousands of feet of volcanic debris. But the only witnesses to that with a nervous system were probably primitive jellyfish, because it was over 400 million years ago in the Precambrian era. The resulting volcanic rock from that volcano provided greenstone schist, metabasalt, rhyolite, and metarhyolite, which is similar to obsidian. Up to 20,000 years ago, primitive man discovered these easily sharpened rocks and laboriously quarried, processed, used, and traded these tools across the eastern half of the continent. This is one of the oldest industrial sites in North America, which are the rhyolite quarries in the Carball Run natural area. This is also some of the oldest geology in Pennsylvania. So underneath the Michaux, there are no shallow gas reserves. Oops, sorry, that's shallow gas reserves. There are no coal deposits. There are no Marcellus deposits. So there's been no fracking or drilling, but we do have a few pipelines that cross the state forest to support the fuel industry. We were not glaciated, and newer stone has been laid over that volcanic layer and mixed into it, one of which is Tomstown Dolomite, shown in blue, dark blue, which contains iron ore and weathers into clays. Other bedrocks consist of sandstones, and there's been extensive historic iron and clay extraction, and still are active sand and stone mining operations in and around the Michaux. These sandstones weather over time into sandy soils, which promote a dry site adapted forest. This is the vegetative map of the Michaux. We map our forests into units called stands, which are used for monitoring and management. A stand is the smallest unit of a forest that is uniform in species, density, and size of trees. In this map, the stand vegetation type is shown. Mustard yellow color is the dry oak heath forest that dominates the Michaux State Forest. This is mostly a shorter chestnut oak dominated forest with mountain laurel, huckleberry, rhododendron in the understory, but it wasn't always this way. Our forests are the results of past management. Most of our state has been cut off at some point in the last 130 years, with the exception of a few smaller old growth virgin forests. And that's roughly 1/100th of a percent of Pennsylvania forests, which is not very much. Originally, Pennsylvania was covered with extensive pine and hemlock forests. Early colonists under the British rule harvested those timbers for shipbuilding, especially the tall, straight white pines. And this harvesting stuck to the rivers and the waterways that logs could be floated in. As time went on, more efficient methods of transporting the logs to where they were needed came about, and the harvesting spread away from the rivers into the areas like the Michaux State Forest. These trees built America and fueled the Industrial Revolution. There's one quote from the Pennsylvania Forestry Report from the early 1900s that said, The original timber had all been removed between 1870 and 1885, and the young second growth was cut as soon as it became large enough to make a stick. By 1895, forest cover in Pennsylvania fell from over 90% to just 36%. At the same time as the timber was being used to build the colonies and the colonies became a fledgling nation, iron was a much needed commodity. The iron industry truly shaped the South Mountain landscape. Iron furnaces, sorry about that, I have a goose on my front porch. Iron furnaces sprung up anywhere that iron deposits, water power, and wood for fuel could be found. The dawn of the Industrial Revolution increased the need for iron and necessitated the production of more charcoal to fuel the furnaces. Charcoal is made by skilled woodsmen called colliers in what are known as charcoal hearths. 4,000 known hearths dot the Michaux State Forest alone, and a trail system connected each hearth to somewhere to transport the finished product. These trails are still a visible scar on the ground in many places. Many areas in the Michaux were harvested multiple times while the furnaces were in use. Pine Grove Furnace, shown in the bottom right, now Pine Grove Furnace State Park, repeatedly harvested 20,000 acres of forest to supply the needed charcoal. And that's just one of the 14 furnaces that were in the region. The Old Forge picnic area is originally the Old Forge Hughes Furnace and Rolling Mill. The Monalto Iron Works, Marianne Furnace, Caledonia Iron Works are all located on or near DCNR lands. But after all that harvesting, we still have a forest, which is considered second growth. Remember, I said it was nearly all cut off. And the species that persist today are mostly considered fire adapted because they survived the repeated burnings during and after the exploitive harvesting era and the iron industry time. With the exploitive harvesting and repeated burning came erosion. To protect the recovering forest and the drinking water supply, the Department of Forestry was founded in 1902, mainly as a firefighting and reforestation force. When fire, which is a natural disturbance, was completely removed or almost completely removed, it allowed species that are not fire adapted to move into our forests, like red maple and black birch. A little bit about the history of the state forest itself. Michaux State Forest is aptly named District 1, and that's because we were the first forest reserve. In 1902, the original tract of land was 558 acres, and over time it's been added on to largely from iron company tracts and then a few paper company land sales. And the last 1,000 plus acres, which will probably be the last 1,000 plus acreage parcel was added in 2017. We currently have about 88,000 acres. And the Michaux is a working forest. So as part of our mission statement, we're to supply sustainable yields of timber, low density recreational opportunities, keeping that wild character, clean water, biological diversity, and wildlife habitat. And we do this by, I'm sorry, got off track there. This slide shows the forest age distribution that was current in 2003. You can see that there's a gigantic hump in the 60 to 120-year-old categories, and that's a legacy from the harvesting for the Industrial Revolution. By selecting areas that are biologically or economically mature or that have the greatest potential for regenerating with the least amount of help, we harvest the trees, providing that high-quality timber and restarting the forest at the same time. Mostly this is done through natural regeneration, meaning that no replanting is necessary. Our goal is to balance the age classes by 2140 and have a sustainable yield of timber and a variety of habitats so that our entire forest doesn't all age and decline at the same time. You'll notice there's still quite a bit of a hump at the older age classes. And that's because we are keeping areas as designated natural areas, wild areas, and also areas that are in extended rotation to eventually provide old growth habitat again. We not only do prescriptive management, but we also do salvage harvests. The image there shows a wind-thrown area, but we also salvage from wildfires, insects, and disease mortality. And the most recent salvage that we did on the Michaux was an Anthracnose outbreak, which is a fungal pathogen that affects chestnut oak. Excuse me. that affected thousands of acres of chestnut oak in the northern portion of our state forest. This map shows the stands that have been regenerated since 1960, shown in blue, and the green spots are our natural areas, and the salmon colors show the nearby state parks. So what challenges do we face in our mission statement? Our mission statement is pretty simple, but forestry isn't rocket science. There's many challenges that we have to overcome to sustain that yield of timber and to provide the habitat quality that we enjoy. Overbrowsing by deer, invasive insects, and disease sweep through and kill our defenseless native plants. Invasive plants crowd out and kill our native desirable trees, shrubs, and plants while being resistant to that deer browsing that I spoke about earlier. We also still face the threat of wildfire. Recreational pressures make every timber sale more difficult. Timber harvests change the way an area looks temporarily, and many people think that responsibly cutting trees is a bad thing. Fragmentation is another threat to our mission statement. On private lands, as parcels become smaller and smaller, it is hard to manage forests on a 10-acre or less scale. The average forested parcel in Pennsylvania is less than 20 acres. The land not held by the Commonwealth gets cut into smaller parcels, and state forest managers have to interact with more and more landowners on a daily basis that adjoin state forests, making more work for the foresters for things like hazard tree removal, boundary disputes, road use agreements, and rights of ways. The Michaux has more adjacent landowners than most larger state forests. I spoke about overbrowsing by deer. Here's a perfect example of what overbrowsing by deer can look like. The left side of the screen is a deer exclosure. The right side is outside of the deer exclosure. So overbrowsing by deer, or just preferential browsing of desirable species, increases the cost of management. Deer fences are not cheap. A deer exclosure fence like the one shown here is sometimes necessary to ensure that some species are retained or increased in the future forest. And no, we don't keep giraffes in the fence. It's a forestry tool. I've had that question before. Gypsy moth is a big player in why our state forest looks the way it does. Gypsy moth arrived in the Michaux State Forest in the early 70s or 80s and has had a continuous role in changing how our forests look. Here's an image from one of our annual forest pest aerial surveys, where we fly the state and look for defoliation events. Those bare trees on the tops of the mountains should be fully green. Those are our chestnut oak forests, eaten by a severe outbreak of gypsy moth. And recently, it looks just like that. Last year, it looked just like that because of the Anthracnose outbreak. Where these pests have killed the trees in the last 30 years, less preferred species like red maple, black gum, and birch move in to take up the light. Another activity we do on the Michaux State Forest is seed collection. This is a truckload of black walnuts that were collected for the DCNR State Nursery. These are used for areas that did not regenerate correctly. And like I said, we don't like to plant trees because it's a lot of work and it costs a lot of money. We really rely on our natural regeneration. But in those areas that don't regenerate, we plant seeds or seedlings to replace the trees that did not grow. Wildlife is very important to our forest ecosystem. Our foresters assist our eco services section to monitor wildlife numbers and rare and vulnerable plant populations. The bottom left corner of the screen shows a rattlesnake that's being sexed, measured, and RFID chipped in a trap and recapture study to evaluate their population. Forest recreation is also a large part of what we do every day in the state forest. Because of our location and extensive trail system, the Michaux is a popular venue for running, cycling, horseback, and off-road motorcycle races. And this is the type of recreation that we really encourage and enjoy. Dispersed, low density, low impact recreation. Primitive backpack camping is allowed in most areas for when you're getting deep into the woods for one-night stays. There are 24 designated campsites for motorized camping where a vehicle is used to get to the site. These sites require a free camping permit, which is available online. In non-COVID times, we have more camping permits issued than any other district. I'm sorry. Thought I silenced my phone, but I guess I didn't. In non-COVID times, we have more camping permits issued than any other district. During the peak of COVID shutdowns last summer, we've been maxed out every weekday even on camping permits. So our forest district fell to number 2 because we have fewer campsites than other forests. A good tip is to reserve your spot well in advance of hitting the road. Don't call us on the way there to get a permit because you might not have a spot to set up a tent. Not only camping, but we also offer fantastic hunting and fishing opportunities. We have 70 miles of shared use trails, and shared use means that you can hike, bike, or ride horses. There are 2 hiking only trails, the Easy Beaver Trail along the Long Pine Reservoir and the Buck Ridge Trail connecting Pine Grove Furnace to Kings Gap State Parks. There's a 4-mile cross-country ski trail of various difficulties. There's a 9-hole vendor run South Mountain Golf Course. We have 36 miles of ATV trails that are seasonally open. We have 36 miles of Appalachian Trail, which is more than any other state forest in Pennsylvania. And this year, the Michaux is proud to hold the halfway point of the Appalachian Trail. And I say this year because it moves up and down the trail a little bit based on reroutes. Our forest contains 453 leased campsites. Since 1913, citizens of Pennsylvania have been able to lease a plot of land and maintain a building on the site for a recreational cabin. This program is no longer expanding since 1979, but the leases are renewed every 10 years. And you often hear about 99-year leases on state forest, and that just doesn't exist. They're a 10-year lease for a very low fee. So wildfire is still a threat to our sustainable timber harvests. We are tasked with providing wildfire suppression. The Michaux Forest staff are very capable wildland firefighters, and some even work nationally when states request assistance. We ask that everyone be careful with fire. Prescribed fire is a tool that our foresters use to help reduce the fuels that lead to catastrophic fires and to use to manage the species found in the forest. A great example of where fire was used to increase the amount of light hitting the forest floor can be found between Big Pond and Hogshead Road in the northern portion of the state forest. Although much less densely populated at any given time, the Michaux State Forest is just barely smaller than Philadelphia County, so we have our own police force. Illegal activities like littering, dumping yard and household waste, off-roading, camping in the wrong areas or without a permit, timber theft, driving under the influence, reckless driving, and picnicking at Long Pine, or any other breach of the state forest rules and regulations will earn you a visit from our state forest officers or rangers, which carry the same authority as state police on state forest lands. There's several notable features and places I'd like to showcase to you for exploration: CCC camps, natural areas, rock climbing sites, reservoirs, the range, state parks, fire lookouts, scenic vistas, and the dwarf forest. The Civilian Conservation Corps established several camps on the South Mountain during the Great Depression, putting unemployed young men to work cutting roads and trails, planting trees, fighting wildfires, constructing bridges and buildings in the newly established state parks and forests, and learning skills for future meaningful employment. Here's the Pine Grove Furnace Camp when it was in operation. This one is located off of Michaux Road. As you can see, well, you can't really see in that picture, but they are designed very similar to an army barracks. The remote location and established camp at Pine Grove Furnace provided the government an ideal place to hold and interrogate foreign prisoners of World War II. Not much remains today, but there is an interpretive trail that winds through the historic ruins. This image shows the added guard towers to watch the prisoners in the background there. After the war, the camp was turned into a church camp until it was largely dismantled in 1972. And who wouldn't want a vacation in a former prison? We have 4 natural areas set aside to protect interesting natural or archaeological areas. Meeting of the Pines is where 5 species of pine are found in one place. The southern pines and northern pine ranges overlap. Carball Run is a concentration of prehistoric rhyolite quarries. Mount Sidonia Ponds is a complex of vernal pools that support rare and sensitive plants and aquatic animal species. And Beartown Woods, in the very southern portion of the forest, is a northern forest type that is out of place in our South Mountain, and it may be old growth. Our state forest is home to the State Forest Shooting Range. It offers a 70-yard rifle range, a 3 to 25-yard pistol range, covered shooting stations, and a permit is required and available for 30 days or as an annual permit from the district office for a reasonable price. 4 of the 121 Pennsylvania state parks adjoin the Michaux State Forest. While the state forest provides primitive amenities, state parks provide more creature comforts and higher density recreational opportunities. The Michaux State Forest boasts 3 designated rock climbing sites that are occasionally reserved for climbing groups and outward bound school programs. We have 2 reservoirs. Long Pine Run Reservoir was constructed in 1969 to supply Chambersburg with drinking water. The impoundment area is 155 acres and has 1.75 billion gallons of water in it at capacity. It is a warm water fishery and non-powered boats are permitted. However, swimming, camping, wading, and picnicking are not allowed in this area. Carball Reservoir supplies drinking water to the historic South Mountain Sanatorium for tuberculosis patients, which is now known as the South Mountain Restoration Center. Boating is prohibited, but fishing and picnicking are allowed. Wildfires threatened to undo all of the hard work that the early reforestation efforts had achieved. The Department of Forestry erected fire towers on high points throughout the state to give foresters early warning of wildfires. The Michaux was the location of the first fire tower in 1905, which was made of wood, but eventually there were 449 fire lookout towers in Pennsylvania. The fire towers on the Michaux have been mostly abandoned with the invention of the cell phone, but they can still be found and admired as part of forest history. More remote northern districts have recently built new towers, which are the first new towers built in any state in a long time. There is still a need for towers where there is no cell service. There are 2 fire towers remaining on the Michaux State Forest, Snowy Mountain Fire Tower and Big Flat Fire Tower. Snowy Mountain Fire Tower made the news in the 70s when vandals cut it down with a hacksaw, but they were caught and made to pay for the repair of the damages. The Big Flat Fire Tower is 60 feet tall and located off of Ridge Road on private property. It is slated to be demolished soon, though. The fire towers are unsafe and off limits to forest visitors. We have quite a few scenic vistas. We're fortunate to have 8 of them, or overlooks on the Michaux. Pole Steeple, shown here. Sunset Rocks, Valley View, Dark Hollow, Spruce Run, Buzzards Rocks, Hammond's Rocks, and Snowy Mountain. We are home to a interesting forest type. It's a ridgetop dwarf tree forest community. This unique forest is found on high elevation, poor sites with sandy soils that allow the trees to grow to diminutive heights even when fully mature. These trees are at most 60 feet tall. Several rare plants and moths are found in the Pine Flat Barrens, which have recently become the focus of landscape restoration projects through mowing and burning, like the Big Burn on Hogshead and Big Pond roads, to restore this ecotype to a more natural state. These areas are flagged as the most likely place that the declining populations of our state bird, the ruffed grouse, will be able to persist through the West Nile virus, making projects like these even more important. The Michaux is mostly continuous forest, so 43 specially maintained wildlife openings have been created to provide habitat diversity. Here's a sample planting plan where native grasses and wildflowers were planted to provide benefits to pollinators and the wildlife that rely on them to enrich our forest habitat. There are 130 miles of gravel road open to the public for registered vehicles that are maintained by district staff. along with many more miles of gated forest roads that are used for administrative access, forest management activities, and fire suppression. Forest roads and trails are the leading cause of sedimentation in Pennsylvania streams, making maintenance of these roads following the best management practices a high priority for our staff to allow the staff and public access to the forest with the least harm to the natural resources. DCNR Bureau of Forestry maintains around 2,200 miles of roads, making it the second largest road maintenance agency behind PennDOT. Foresters like myself are not the only ones that work at the Michaux State Forest. From the district forester to the interns, we all play a part in making the Michaux a world-renowned destination and a legacy for generations to come. This is your forest. Please come out and visit us. Here's my contact information. If you have any questions, feel free to call or email me. I'm happy to help you out in any way I can. That concludes my talk, Sarah.
Thank you, John. We will open it up to Q&A session now. If anyone has any questions for John, please go ahead and put them in the chat. I do have one question, John. I know that your recreation forester position is currently open, but if folks wanted to volunteer for in the forest district, where would they go to volunteer their time?
So the easiest way to find it is to go to the DCNR website and then enter conservation volunteer in the search bar. I'm not sure on the step to get you from the main page to the conservation volunteer sign up sheet, other than just searching for it on the website.
All right, our questions are coming in. So let's see. From riding horses and hiking in the forest, it seemed to me that a lot of older trees and forest areas are still being cut. Is there any effort to try to preserve as much of the older trees as possible? And if not, why not?
So the thing to remember about Pennsylvania is that it has all been cut for the most part. So those older trees, when you say older trees, you're probably talking about larger diameter trees. And when you're walking through the forest, you can't really look at the diameter of a tree and tell how old it is. Skinny trees can be just as old as the thicker trees. So we typically use what's called even-aged management. Our forest is mostly even-aged currently, and we do even-aged management again, where we restart patchworks. If you saw that picture in the presentation where there's like a quilt-like appearance to the forest, it's because we regenerated or restarted certain sections of it to reset them back to young ages.
The next question, I'm not sure if you will have the answer to this, but we have a question about where the best birding location within the forest is.
It depends on what kind of birds you're looking for. If you're looking for neotropicals, we have quite a few neotropical migratory birds found throughout the forest. I don't know, it really depends on what kind of birder you are.
You can find geese outside of his office.
Well, that's outside of my house.
Ah, okay, then don't go to his house.
No.
Let's see, the next question. So this is, I guess, a law enforcement question of what's the success rate for catching violators within the forest?
I would say it's pretty good. A lot of times the dumpers are not the smartest people, so they leave their name and address in their trash. So it's pretty easy to catch them.
Let's see. This question I can answer. There was a question on where the lady slippers were, and the response is, it's a secret.
It is a secret, yes. It's on the Michaux. Come out and find it.
Let's see. Where are the areas you intend to let the trees grow to old growth?
So the natural areas are the first that I would say. There are some plant sanctuaries that are also old growth, and also inoperable areas that are too steep or too rocky. Those would also be designated to be old growth, just because of the inability to access them.
We have a question about spotted lanternfly and how have they been detected in the forest, and what are you doing about them?
They have been detected in our forest. We've found one population in the northwestern portion of our forest in Franklin County. And what we're doing about it is mostly the same thing we've always been doing. Their preferred host tree is the tree of heaven, and that's one of our higher priority species to go after to suppress. So if we can get rid of the tree of heaven, we'll reduce the amount of spotted lanternfly in our forest.
We have a question about clear cutting around the parking lot at Long Pine.
Okay, that is a parking lot expansion, and also there is a restroom facility being installed there. Because it is a drinking water source, they want to remove the potential for contamination, so a restroom is being installed. It's not a clear cut, it's a development area.
Okay, let's see. Oh, we've got some shout outs for the Friends of the Michaux.
Yes.
There is a website that was put in the chat, as well as a shout out to the Facebook group. Claire says that if folks would like to volunteer through the Friends group, there are stewardship opportunities there as well. So I will look to find the DCNR volunteer link, but you could also volunteer directly through the Friends group. Let's see, next question.
I see one question. Can I jump in? I see one that we might have gone past. What kind of activities do volunteers do? I would say just about anything you could possibly want to do. If you have a skill set, we'll take it. And there's only so many of us in the forest that work there, and we can always use volunteers. So trail clearing, trash pickup, painting, sign making, the list is basically endless.
This is Claire. I'm the chair of the Friends of Michaux. And today we actually have volunteers out working right now with DCNR staff at the Bunker Hill site to plant trees and shrubs. We've helped with seed collection, trash pickup, all that stuff. So yeah, as John said, it will take anybody.
Hi, Claire.
Hi, John. sorry to butt in, but I gotta like anytime you talk about volunteering, I get a little overexcited. So I'll shut down now.
That's okay. I'm glad you jumped in. Volunteers are the lifeblood of any organization. So thanks for chiming in. There's so many questions. Okay, question about plans for future Gypsy Moth mitigation.
Well, we just completed our spray program for this year. We had quite a few areas that had egg masses above the threshold for spraying. They sprayed, I can't remember, several thousand acres this year in the Michaux State Forest.
Are you going to put boat slips in at Long Pine?
Not that I'm aware of. There is one boat launch, and that's all I know of.
All right, and then are there any plans to restore the old spring house next to Laurel Lake?
I'm not aware of it, no. Nope.
Okay, and then we just have one more question pop up. Given that we've destroyed almost all of the old age forest, wouldn't it make sense to try to restore as much older age and mature forest as possible?
So remember that graph that I showed you with the acreages by age? We are going to be restoring older age forest and extended rotation forest in those areas. But we do need to harvest some because we use wood products every day.
Oh, there we go. If I missed your question, I apologize. Please put it at the bottom of the chat once again. There was a lot all at once. We had another chime in from Claire saying that Laurel Lake is part of Pine Grove Furnace State Park. So the question about the spring house should go to them.
It depends on which side of the road you're looking at, because the line is the southern road there. So we have the left side of the road and they have the right side of the road if you're going into the park from the south or from the north.
We have another question about climate, and it says older trees capture more carbon. Does your timber policy, so your timber policy affects climate change? Is the forest adjusting to climate issues?
There is a climate change plan that has been worked on, and I'm not super familiar with what it entails. It's just a very early stages of adapting to climate change for our forest. But we do have some considerations where we only gather seed for local planting. So if we gather seed in the Michaux, it goes to the state nursery and then it comes back to the Michaux to plant. So we're looking at possibly partnering with some southern agencies to get seed from southern species that maybe need assistance migrating north, possibly for more resilience to climate change.
We have a question asking if the ore hole at the end of Old Railroad Bed is going to be filled in.
Not that I'm aware of, no.
And
I think that might be on parkland. I'm not sure.
Okay. This one we actually spoke about the other day, asking about why no picnicking is allowed at Long Pine Reservoir.
I do not know. I do not know why it is not allowed. I think it's to reduce the amount of people defecating and urinating in the water source, but I'm not sure.
Is there public access to the forest road maintenance schedule?
Not sure. No, I don't know.
All right, let's see. Is there any attempt to determine whether we are losing topsoil quantity or quality due to repeated cutting of forests?
In a forested setting, most forests grow soil, and I don't know if there's been any studies on whether we're losing any due to the cutting and burning.
These are some good questions, everyone. Let's see. One question that hasn't come up is along the lines of gas infrastructure within our state forest lands. I know that a lot of state forests do have well pad build out or fracking infrastructure. I believe you said the other day that there were no fracking sites within the Michaux, but that there were pipeline infrastructure.
Correct. Yep.
All right. I don't believe there's any other questions at this time. If anyone has any last minute questions, we do have a few more minutes left. Otherwise, if you think of something after the presentation is done for the day, you can send it to myself or you can send it to John, and we will work to get those answers. I know.
Would you like me to share my contact information one more time?
Yes, please.
No problem.
And I know there were one or two questions that we did not have answers to today. We can try to get answers at least about the road maintenance question.
Yep, I would look into that. If you can send me an email, I'd be happy to answer that.
And then we had one last comment, not quite a question, but appreciate that Long Pine Run Reservoir is as wild as it is. Very few public lakes look as beautiful and undeveloped. Deterring some activities by offering fewer allowed activities helps keep it wild. So thank you for that. Thank you, John, for presenting today. Really appreciate it. Learned a lot about another one of our forest districts today. So
I learned a lot today also. I learned quite a bit while putting this presentation together, so it was a learning experience for me.
Everyone is learning together.
Yes.
And I will make sure that this recording gets out to everyone who registered today. And thank you for coming. Enjoy the rest of this beautiful sunny day.